mean, this is my speculation, so don't think this has been confirmed by other researchers, but it's been my observation. Uh, Toward the end of his life, he had one final gigantic project that he wanted to get off the ground. His other projects, they were good ideas, but he couldn't get anybody to back them anymore. Since the railroad failed, people didn't trust him to have a successful project any longer. But he had one last plan, and that was what he called Planet Airship. This was the most massive hydrogen balloon imaginable. It had a lifting capacity of an unbelievable 72 tons. The way he envisioned it, he had plans for it. There was going to be a cabin that could hold 20 people, and suspended from that cabin was going to be a lifeboat. The lifeboat had a kind of propeller and motors. The propellers could be changed in direction so you could actually steer the balloon a little bit better. Anyway, those plans are at the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. to the present time. That's the truth. But he had a friend named Dwight Willard, who was a newspaperman at the LA Times, and they were friendly. Willard wrote about Lowe's projects, helped sell newspapers. So Lowe finally decided to take his plans to Willard in order to get publicity for his project, Planet Airship. Now, when he went down to the Times building, and he met up with Willard. Willard had a daughter, Florence Willard. Florence Willard was very interested in Professor Lowe and his life, and wanted to write a big story about Professor Lowe and this latest project, Planet Airship. And she was fascinated with his Civil War efforts, the Mountain Railroad, which she had ridden on as a young person. She lived in Glendale, California, and Pasadena is right next door. She went up on this thing, and she just thought he was an amazing individual. And she was going to have a multi-piece written about Professor Lowe. Well, that very night after she met up with Lowe, there was a tremendous bombing of the LA Times building by union activists. They were eventually convicted. A number of people were killed, but that Lowe's story got buried because of the bombing, and the paper kept writing about the bombing and tracking down who did it. And Lowe's story just never made it to the headlines. But Florence Willard, she got married and became Florence Ryerson, and she became a screenwriter. And in the 1930s, she was asked to do a brand new screenplay based on The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. This was written by Frank Baum, published in 1900. Well, Florence had two other co-writers, but they were much less significant in the production of the screenplay, and it's very definitely known that Florence created the character of Professor Marvel. The entire period before the, you might say, the tornado took up Dorothy and Toto, was Florence Ryerson's creation. And the casting of Professor Marvel and the Wizard of Oz, you have to look at who was cast and what went into it. I am of the opinion that they chose actor Frank Morgan. Frank Morgan is an absolute spitting image of Professor Lowe. There is no doubt about it. You look at him, you look at Lowe, they're twins. If you read the original Wonderful Wizard of Oz by Frank Baum. This is not to take anything from his work, which was wonderful. You don't get the sense that the wizard and the Wizard of Oz in the movie, the 1939 movie, are the same. But when you read or see the movie, The Wizard of Oz, that came out as a movie, which was the product to a large extent of Florence Ryerson, what should come to your mind, and what comes to my mind, is Professor Lowe. A couple of years ago, I was at the Pasadena History Museum. They had a picture of Lowe there in his balloon, especially right next to it was a picture at the end of The Wizard of Oz with Frank Morgan in the basket. They look the same, and obviously people have seen the correlation. I believe that the reason there is that image of what we believe now, or our image that we have now of the Wizard of Oz, is because of Florence Ryerson. She's the one that created it, and she used Lowe as her model, not the original Wonderful Wizard, but Lowe. So Lowe, in a way, lives on in that famous movie.